Shall I go ahead?
Yes,
Thank
floor
you
is
for all the
yours.
talks so far. It's really interesting. It's great to get the chance to talk about this. I don't get the chance to talk about this kind of stuff with other people very much. In fact, as you probably know, most people don't really like talking about climate change. They don't like talking about it around the dinner table. They don't like talking about it on the train. They don't really like talking about it at work. It's not a subject people enjoy talking about, but they have to talk about it. And they have to talk about it because, as we all know, it's basically forever. As far as anybody alive on the planet is concerned, it is forever. It's not going to get better. The situation will just get worse. The warming will continue as far as us in the room are concerned. Whatever action we take, many of these consequences are there forever. So we need to talk about adaptation. I don't mean forever in the life of the planet, but forever as far as our lifetimes are concerned. It's here. So we need to talk about adaptation. And at the moment, we talk a lot about mitigation. We talk about cutting greenhouse gases because politicians love shiny new wind farms, really nice solar panels, etc. Those things are catchy. They look great for the photo opportunity, but I don't think we talk about adaptation enough. It's not necessarily out there. And I want to talk about the messaging around it, how maybe we could try and engage communities around adaptation better. First off, let's talk about, somebody else did this earlier. What are we doing wrong? I think it's probably a good place to start. My points of view on what we're doing wrong are not necessarily yours. And I hope this is also a chance for us to have a chat later when we're having a coffee break. So what doesn't work? One of the first stories I made for our Climate Now series on Euronews was on a melting glacier. And one of the reasons I've chosen this one as a what doesn't work is I went back with a great story, great drone shots, interesting sound bites. My editors are all in the room or watching the first episode, and they say, well, can you say something positive at the end? Well, no, there's nothing positive to say at the end. The Alps will just change color. It's dangerous during that process. And in the end, we don't have any ice. I think the Slovenians know what this is like already. Yeah, there isn't really a kind of a positive twist. But NBC covered the same story with practically the same people a couple of weeks ago, and they did put a little positive twist at the end. The people who owned Euronews at that time were actually NBC, as to say that's kind of their approach. You're going to hate me for the next one, but I also think it doesn't work. Now, we spent a long time talking about climate change and talking about polar bears. Now, I'm sorry to admit, I don't really care about polar bears enormously. And if I'm quite scared of them, I think they probably want to eat me. There aren't any where I live. There aren't anywhere where I go. I don't see them when I go on holiday. I don't know anybody who's ever seen one. So has your neighbor, your community, when they took a vote about what to do about climate change, ever really talked about polar bears? No, probably not. You might know somebody who's taken some action, changed their action because of this, because they care about animals. It's a tiny minority. Let's talk about stuff that maybe works a bit. I think this works. Now, here, these are kind of stock shots I found, but we know these kinds of images. It's a man in the Amazon. His face is blackened by the soot we would imagine. What appears to be his boat is burning in the background. We know this story. We're aware of it. We see it. And some genius came up with the idea of the lungs of the earth. And that works. That works because everybody's got lungs. They like breathing. They need to breathe air for the rest of the day and the rest of their lives. And so the concept of the lungs of the earth are burning did work. I think it kind of cuts through. I take action on buying products that don't support deforestation. I expect you do too. I bet that's one of the reasons, because you can imagine it and you can think, you know what that smells like, right? You don't know what it smells like when you go and hang out with a polar bear. It's probably a bit scary. But here, you know what that smells like and you know it's nasty. Let's talk about some stories that are looking for their lungs of the earth moment. They're not there yet. Here we have one of the Marshall Islands. That's not the whole Marshall Islands. We know that they're slowly sinking. It's pretty much inevitable they're going to have to abandon. Although I was hearing on the Outrage and Optimism podcast that the Solomon Islands are rebuilding rock by rock individually their islands themselves, which is great. But a lot of these places, people don't really think about them very much. We talk about them, but then the conversation moves on. COP, I was there and I saw some of the elected and unelected leaders who we have there. And this story, it comes up every year. We have to talk about it, but do people really engage? Do they really, when they go down the bar, when they go down the pub, when they're around the kitchen table during the week, are they talking about COP? No, probably not, because we're probably not talking about those things in the correct terms, I think. So I was thinking, well, what if we? I mean, this is Jeremy thinks this, by the way. This is not kind of anything more than my opinion. But what happens if we do that? What happens if we do that to it? Suddenly, well, I've got kids. I'm sure some of you have got kids, or you know some kids. We've got these cute kids in their nice boat and their island, which is low-lying and vulnerable. Don't let us drown. We've personified them. You can relate to them. If I could buy a product that I thought, or I could do something I thought would help them not drown, I probably would do it. Let's have a look at COP. What about this one? What will it cost? If you suddenly frame it quite clearly in how much money am I going to get in or out of my pocket because of this thing, it's a lot clearer. Because in a lot of the coverage of COP, we talk about big numbers. They're totally unrelatable to anybody. You know, and a lot of these leaders are also greatly disliked, let's be honest. And some of them are just awful despots. And at the moment, they're making decisions for our future lives. So how do we get a good conversation going around this? Maybe if we say, how much is it going to cost? Who's going to pay? Is it the democratic leaders who pay? Does everybody pay? Is it the most polluting? Who wins? Who loses? Is that a good way to talk about it? So adaptation is what I wanted to talk about. Adaptation stories are kind of the stories we should be talking about, but we're not enough. I've identified 3 here that I think are important. Heat work is something I think is absolutely vitally important in Europe. Heat deaths at work in Europe, the number is rising. We know it's important. We need to talk about it. I'm preaching to the converted. Droughts, people know they happen, but do they know what to do about it? Do they know what to do about heat at work? Floods, we're also aware of it as a risk, but do people know how to adapt? What should they do? What action can they take? So they're concerned about it. It's in their minds. But you know, are we telling stories that are then turning into action? I don't know. At the moment, what we're doing is this. Certainly a lot of climate change communication that I get related to the European Commission, we get this kind of buzzword bingo. Some of this stuff is just nonsense, really, to most people. You might know what it is, but does anybody know what a circular economy looks like? Have you experienced one? Have you been there? Have you lived in one? No. Does anybody really know anything about, I don't know, what 1 ton of CO2 looks like? No, because you can't see it. What does a net zero world look like? I don't know. There isn't a net zero country I can visit as a tourist to go and see what it's like. Maybe Slovenia, as I've suggested yesterday. It's your opportunity. Just go for it. And then loads of tourists will come. But, you know, we talk about nature-based solutions. Once you've actually seen one, you go, oh, right. So you dig out the river like this and then you do that. Oh, okay, I understand it. But this is jargon, tipping points. We talk about CCS and CDR. And we just, what is this stuff? I don't know. We're not really talking to people in terms that they can really understand, that really resonate with them, I don't think, in our climate change communication. What should we do? I think we should do this, concentrate on finding the health or the wealth related angle in the story that you want to communicate. So if you want to talk to the people of Ljubljana about heat health, then you need to kind of really dig in to things that are going to affect them. Have they felt particularly warm when walking from X place to another? Have they felt particularly warm in this place? And then what action should they take? Around it, I've put some of the words that people do talk about when they're talking about climate change, when they're talking about risks and future worries that they have about food, about floods, about heat waves, their family, their home, fires. Those things are scary, they're tangible, we know about them. And at the moment, we're wasting a lot of our time in climate change communication talking about the words around the edge, like Like adaptation. Do people instantly know what that is? No, probably not. Resilience is a kind of a nonsense word as well that you hear from a lot of politicians. They talk about resilience. What is that? I don't know. Who wins, who loses? Does it make me happier and healthier? Does it make me richer or poorer? I don't really know. I know like steel is resilient. That's, if you think of it, that's a material. Maybe I could think of resilience, but a resilient economy, what is that? I don't know. So I don't think that we're necessarily framing our stories well. I don't think we're talking in terms that everybody understands. And I think even when we simplify it, it's not simple enough. And the way you make it simple and touch people's hearts and minds and get conversations started, I think, is by focusing on health and wealth in the widest sense. I showed this to a friend and he said, well, what about war? And I said, well, I think that's health. Yeah, it's very much in the widest sense. And this conclusion I've drawn from 30 years working in journalism, not only on climate change, but also on economic issues as well, and also health topics. This conclusion I've drawn is basically on not necessarily the most successful stories, but the stories that are talked about for a long time, or that stay there and never really go away, or the ones that inspire action, let's say. Let's look at two times when the world really moved fast. We know both of these, the 2008 financial crisis and the COVID pandemic. The world moved quickly. So health and wealth. Great. Okay, that supports my argument. Does the data that we have from Euronews support my argument? Kind of. This is Euronews Green, which is a part of Euronews. Euronews broadcasts in 17 languages around the world. We make programs about many different things for TV. We also make an awful lot of great digital content. We have a fantastic app, which I recommend. I think it's our best product. And then Euronews Green is one of the kind of channels within that. So in the last 12 months, this is just a snapshot. The top story is about the average European uses 20 kilograms of toilet paper a year. What are the green alternatives? Which is kind of funny. It's kind of catchy. And actually, when you read the article, it's a health story. It's about the sanitation benefits, etc. And what are the green alternatives? If you look at the next one down, that's a news story about the Portuguese man of war, climate change related, because sea surface temperatures have brought these creatures to places they weren't in the past, or weren't regularly in the past. Anyway, obviously that's health related. The third one is a great quote from a minister from the Papua New Guinea saying that COP29 is a total waste of time. You may have your own view about that, but 60% of the readers for that were for our Russian service. Now, you think, what's happening there? Now, the Russians don't really want multilateralism, so they wouldn't really want COP to succeed. Okay, that's a political point of view. But also, of course, their wealth is entirely tied to fossil fuels. So maybe that's a wealth story too, actually. This one here, could these motionless wind turbines solve wind energy's noise and wildlife problems? Our audience loves techie stories about green stuff, like solar panels and wind. And we know they're also concerned about some of those side effects that you hear about, like damage to bird populations, etc. Ultimately, for me, that's kind of a wealth story, because we're interested in the energy transition, and it's the health of birds story too. So people who care about that will care about that. But and then the Hurricane Kirk story is clearly a health and wealth story, because you're thinking, is my house going to shake tonight? Am I going to need to go and fix something tomorrow? Am I going to have a flood or not? How do things work out from here? Let's have a look at our top videos. This is just for the Euronews Green, just on their particular channel. So it's not across all of Euronews, and those figures are not representative of normal Euronews figures. These are kind of social media video numbers. So that's why they're not very high. Anyway, Spanish floods was the top story. Everybody could relate to that. It looked like where you live, where you go on holiday, your friend might be from there, and that house looks a bit like your house. And that story resonated with people a lot. And I'm sure that if you go to discussions at community level, city level, regional level, and national level, nobody's going to be talking about polar bears. Somebody is going to be talking about the Spanish floods, or the floods in Germany or in Belgium or here. they took action straight away, right? Here in Slovenia, serious action happened quite quickly. There was a great political move in one direction. There was a change in the taxation laws, big investment, action happened. It wasn't polar bears, it was floods, and it was people's houses getting destroyed and their health and their wealth coming under threat. So on my Climate Now program, we tried to frame adaptation stories in kind of practical terms, questions, I suppose. Catalonia had that great drought. How do they live with it? What do they do in hotels? What do they do in we went to an abattoir, which is actually a great water user. How do they deal with that problem? Health risks of working in a heat wave, talking to a farmer in Greece. We interviewed Andreas Flores, so I'm sure you know, some of you know. Great guy, fantastic academic and a great speaker. We talked about Saharan dust impacting solar power because I don't have solar panels, unfortunately, on my house. My house is too old to support them, according to the solar power experts. But my friends have them, and they certainly talk about how dirty they get and when they should clean them. It's a wealth thing. Slovenia talking about how they tried to flood-proof the country. How high do you build? Literally, how high do you build? Your 100-year flood was maybe this high. Do you build that high? Those kinds of practical questions. People love talking about stuff like that. Breton communities redrawing their urban plan for which property is here because of coastal communities facing these erosion, partially as a result of climate change. People, again, who are homeowners really care about that kind of stuff. It's boring, but they care about it. And wind farms managing variability, absolutely. Of course, it plays into health and wealth because anybody who was in Portugal or Spain, like me, during the power cut knows how important it is to have energy. It wasn't really that much fun, I got to say, to not have any electricity or mobile phone for 6.5 hours or so. So when you're thinking in your institutions about communication around climate change adaptation, I think that we need to make it local and relevant. And I think we need to find ways to frame it in practical terms around issues related to health in the widest sense and wealth in the widest sense. Thank you.